Hey there, and welcome to Worth a Listen, a financial podcast for your everyday life. My name's Chris Haney, and joining me today is Barrett. Barrett, introduce yourself for us.
My name is Barrett Evan. I'm a financial advisor here in the Central Texas area, and I'm excited about kind of opening the curtain, if you will, on the world of financial advising and how the citizens around us, both young and old, can benefit from financial advice.
Today, Barrett's here to talk about investing. Today's topic is going to be Investment 101. We're going to go through just a short explanation of kind of what investing is. We're going to talk about why you need to invest, how to invest, and we'll get into some of those pitfalls and things you should probably watch out for. So Barrett, you are a financial advisor, correct?
That is correct.
So what is a financial advisor and what do you do?
Well, the short of it, what I tell people a lot is I'm a coach, in not so many words. I think so many times people come in with preconceived notions of a financial advisor. It sounds fancy. It sounds investment-y. And really all we do is we take the financial situations that people deal with on an everyday basis, budgeting, investing, saving for retirement, and we simplify those and we handle those issues so that those individuals can just go be themselves and not worry about the money problems that people tend to carry in their backpacks.
Well, when it comes to financial advice, our younger generations love like a do-it-myself option. They love to watch, things on the internet and just go about it themselves. So why would you choose a financial advisor over kind of like a do-it-myself or just go out on the internet and find the information?
Yeah. So this generation is going to be the most different generation that we've had to deal with as financial advisors. One of the reasons is they get so much information. Young adults right now, they don't need more information. What they need is a filter. And so I've like to use the analogy that we're essentially a filter for all that financial information, all the TikToks, all the Googles, all the Chat GPTs. We take all of that and we simplify it in a one-to-one conversation and help them really get to the bottom of all that information that they don't have the time or clarity to sift through.
So, and I'm assuming you've gone to school to give financial advice. Talk to us a little bit about what it takes to become a financial advisor.
Absolutely. So interesting enough, it wasn't my first choice or my first task. When I went to the University of Texas, I was actually pre-law. So I was headed the legal route, getting ready to take the LSAT. And I ended up taking a step back and doing education for a while, and I taught economics. And one of the things that really stood out to me while teaching AP economics is that not just the students in my class, but even their parents didn't really have the financial wherewithal to answer some of the big questions that were plaguing their lives. So when I was looking for a change in career, one of the things I really enjoyed was the teaching aspect and the coaching aspect of what I was doing in education. So financial advice was like a perfect, railroad, if you would, to another career because I'm essentially doing the same thing. I'm teaching, I'm educating, I'm bringing light to problems that they didn't even know existed and how to solve them. And so when I left the education world, I got into the testing requirements and the classes that it took to become a financial advisor. There's lots of test taking, obviously, and a lot of courses that you need to go through to really understand the concepts of financial advising. And so after a couple of years, you kind of start, my path was a little unique. I started as a para planner where you're basically building the plans for the advisor. And then after a couple of years, I became a fully fledged licensed financial advisor. And I like the path that I took because I was able to do a hands-on, almost like a nurse to a doctor or a
Sure.
PA, right? And so that was a really unique situation where I didn't jump straight out of college into financial advising, but instead I got to kind of learn the inside ropes, sit in on client meetings before I ran my own, build the plans and the software before I built my own. And so it was a long journey, but it was probably the best way to go about it because I learned so much through that road from legal to education to the financial advising world.
And so you would say through your certification, your training, your education, you are able to give very specific and pointed advice about retirement savings, 401k savings, or just generalized investment strategy.
Right. Every client's different and every person has a different story, which I'm sure we'll talk about multiple times throughout this episode. And that's why I like the filter analogy so well. So when a new client comes in, you have no idea what their story is going to be. Every one of them's different. There might be some that are very similar, but everyone has a new swath of paint that they're going to paint on this story. And our job is to filter that out. What financial advice can we give to them? What situations, what strategies can we use for them specifically that can put them on the right path to financial success?
Got it. So I'm a certified plan sponsor professional. I talk about 401ks, to all of my new employees that come in and do benefits. But I always give them a normal boilerplate statement that I'm not your financial advisor.
Right.
And the reason I do that is really for legal purposes. So, the advice that I give is really generic, really a broad paintbrush, if you will, of what investment is, how should I look at my employees and advise them to give into their retirement. But my advice can only go so far. And for our audience, why is it that my advice can only go so far and I'm limited to what I can say versus the things that you can say?
I will say that being in this industry long enough to know there are so many nuances that, and when I say every client's different, they may have similar situations, but their age or their income level or their tax bracket, all of those things play a very unique role in twisting these dials. And if you twist them in the certain direction, it's going to change the law, or it's going to change the tax bracket, or it's going to change the amount that they're earning or they have to take out of their IRAs. And so there's so many specific nuances that, again, we're playing that filter. We're playing that coach role that says, if X happens, we need to do Y. And so I think sometimes taking that off your shoulders and saying, hey, this is a lot to sift through. We're going to talk about the DIY approach. When you go into the DIY, could you find the answers? Yes. Going on to Google, going on to ChatGPT, and sifting through it for hours. That's our job. If you're spending 2, 3, 4 hours a night trying to figure out what is this going to do to my taxes? What bracket is this going to put me in? Should I be doing Roth conversions? That's 4 hours away from your kids. That's 4 hours away from your hobbies. That's 4 hours away from your marriage. Whereas your financial advisor has gone through these situations with multiple people this week. And so it's fresh on our mind. It's not something new. We have the nuance to be able to filter out that huge amount of information that you're sucking in every day.
I think of an analogy kind of like you get sick and you go to the doctor, right? If I'm sick or if something's wrong with me, let's say I break a finger. That'd be easy. I break my hand, break my finger. Am I going to set the bone myself? I can go to Google. I can go to YouTube. Right. I can probably YouTube how to set a bone. 100%. I can probably YouTube how to splint my finger. But I'm going to run into some issues maybe. I might not set that bone correctly. I might not set the splint right, what results in a crooked finger or something wrong with me after the fact. So why would I entrust my health and my safety to me rather than entrusting my health and healing to a professional? And I think that's kind of the idea here is that you are the professional.
100%.
And it's not saying you're not diminishing someone's intelligence by utilizing professionals. And actually, let me ask you this. Of the clients that you represent and of the people who come to you, how smart are some of these people?
Oh, this is a funny question, and I want to touch on this. Again, it's a wide spectrum, and I think that people have a common misconception that every person that walks through our door is either a millionaire or I have to have $500,000 to even walk into a financial advisor's office. Do we have those clients? Absolutely. And we also have the client that walks in and just says, I want to start investing. I just need to start something. I'm behind, or should I be, writing a check or whatever? They start from scratch. So it's such a end of a bell curve. I think I used the bell curve analogy before. We have clients on both ends of the spectrum. The funny thing is that you do have clients from other walks of life that will walk in. We have doctors and some of the smartest people you will ever meet, and they could set that bone, or they're going to go into heart surgery tomorrow, but they have no clue about mutual funds. It's so funny. Like sometimes you'll sit in there and you're like, this is the smartest person. I know we've got people, engineers. I think we have an aerospace engineer. I mean, that just sounds smart, right? But he doesn't have the first clue about Roth conversions, or should he be getting rid of some of this money for quality charity distribution so that it can save him on his taxes. Those are the nuances that we bring. And I think a great analogy, and you reminded me when you're talking about a doctor, we have this one client, I'll say his name's Larry. He's a plumber. He owns a plumbing company. And we had that same exact conversation. And I said, Larry, if my sink started dripping tonight, I'm a millennial. I'll Google it, right? And I will find the YouTube video and I'll go get the tools and make my wife happy, and I'll try to tinker with it. And I could probably figure it out using YouTube. The problem will be if it starts dripping from somewhere else tomorrow. Now I'm back to going to YouTube. And so if I call you, and you come to my house and you open up that sink, you know every single tube, every screw, every part that I need to fix that sink. Same thing we're doing financially. Like you could do it. You could probably YouTube it. But what's going to happen when you make one decision because you saw it on a TikTok and that decision causes a leak in another part of the pipe and you didn't have the forethought because you hadn't dealt with it. You're seeing one piece of that puzzle. And so you're right. We have, like I said, clients of all spectrums who are amazing doctors, dentists, lawyers, and that's their domain. When I need a dentist, I go see Mike. When I need a plumber, I go see Larry. When they need financial advice, they come see Barrett.
So basically what you're saying is professionals use professionals.
100%.
I agree with that statement. All right. So now let's talk about why we invest. One of the things I think about is it is a big question, and younger folk may be sitting here and asking themselves, Barrett, why? Why do I need to invest? I'm 19. I'm 20 years old. I'm going to be here a while. I've got a long time to retirement. Why now?
So I heard this quote, and it's funny. It's really a football, basketball, sports kind of quote. Well, that's a tomorrow me problem.
Yeah.
And I think that generationally right now, the younger you are, you tend to think that that's a tomorrow me problem. Like I can worry about that tomorrow. I have a longer time horizon. The time horizon is one of the biggest tools we use in financial planning. The disconnect is that you're standing on one end of the time horizon, whereas the financial advisor is thinking about the other end of the time horizon, and we're trying to connect that track. It's hard to see the far side of the time horizon when you're the one standing on this side. It's much easier as the financial planner who's always planning for 90, 95 to stand on that side of the bridge and point back at you. And so I think there's a disconnect that says, I'm only 20, I'm only 21, I'm only 30, I'm only 35. I'm not going to retire until I'm 65, 66, 67. Why should I worry about this today? I'm worried about, can I put food on my table? How much is gas prices going up? Can I buy tickets to the next concert I want to go to? That's a tomorrow me problem. My job is to think about the tomorrow you problem, if that makes sense.
It totally makes sense. And I see myself in that statement too, is, I am a millennial. I kind of don't claim to be a millennial. I'm a super old millennial. I like to say I'm a Gen X. I think I have the mentality and the mindset of a Gen X, not to knock millennials. But I can remember thinking that's a tomorrow me problem when I started early in my career. Right. My parents told me, they said, blanket, you need to invest in 401ks. You need to focus on your retirement. That's all I got. That was it. I got nothing else. I got to come home and watch my dad watch Bloomberg and CNN and such. And I got to think, well, maybe one day I'll do that. But it wasn't until I got into my 30s, 35, where I started realizing something was wrong. I'm not going to be able to retire with the income I want. And so I had to start later in life. And I think I'm pretty caught up now. But that tomorrow, there's a problem for tomorrow is a big phenomenon. And that's kind of one of the things we are definitely wanting to impress here, that it is not a tomorrow's problem. It is a today problem. I think about this earlier this year. I was reading an article in Yahoo, and the title of the article was Gen Z and Millennials Need $3 million in retirement to live comfortably. Reading through the article, what they were saying is Gen X or Gen Z millennials are looking at needing, based off of inflation and stuff, about $120,000 to $150,000 annually in retirement to be comfortable. That's a big number. And $3 million, I used to think that $1.5 million was a good mark to make, but after reading this article, it's an eye-catching number. And so talk to me, how long would it generally take someone to gain $3 million in a retirement account?
And I would say the theme of this conversation when we're talking about should I start investing now, why do it now, is that the most important thing that young investors have isn't the money. And that's what they come into thinking.
It's time.
They think the most important thing I got when it comes to investing is the money or how much I can buy. That's not the thing. It's the time. It's the time horizon. That's their most important asset when we're talking about investing. And so the earlier we can drop that seed in, an analogy, if you come to my office tomorrow, you'll hear me say it 15 times. I use the analogy of a snowball. If a tiny snowball is sitting at the top of the hill and it starts rolling down the hill, every time it rolls over, it's accumulating more snow. The bigger it gets, the faster it rolls. And we've all seen the videos when we were younger of the ball, snowball just rolling over, catching an animal and keep going. And it does that. And I do the same thing backwards. If you have to end up taking some money, what are you doing? You're taking money off that snowball, or taking snow off that snowball. It's going to slow it down. And so we really want to use time as our most important asset. The earlier we can put in, the faster we can grow. It's funny you mentioned the million and 3 million. I will be completely honest. I'm a full financial advisor now. When I walked in the doors of our firm for the first time, I had a misconception that $1 million was a lifesaver or an end all be all. You just think because you've heard that phrase. It's such a blanket phrase, right? Oh, $1 million. If I could just be a millionaire. It's funny to be on the other side of the table now, starting to play with yearly income, taxes, estate planning, and realizing not that $1 million is low by any amount. We'd love to have $1 million accounts. It's pretty comfortable. It gives you a high Monte Carlo success rate, but it's not the end all be all. We really would like to, especially given inflation and what we don't know about the future, grow that to 2 or 3 million. It's really more difficult to do that if you start at 40 than if you started with 20 more years of compound interest.
I think of it a lot. I think of this way too: is earlier the better, because like you were using that analogy that investment is like riding a roller coaster. You think of a roller coaster as having a stop and a start. It makes a complete circle, but during that track, you've got a lot of ups, and then you've got a lot of downs, and you've got a lot of ups. But ultimately, at retirement age, you want it to be up. And when we talk about ups and downs, we're more or less talking about your balance and how much money is that in that account. The younger you are, the more aggressive you can be, the more you can handle having that booming bull run market followed by a winter that just falls off the bottom and goes down. And a lot of times I hear young people, especially like 2009. We just recently went 2021 era where we had some downtimes in the market. And I have had employees ask me, should I stop giving? Do I need to take out? I'm worried about my balance. A lot of times my suggestion to them is go talk to your financial advisor, but I will tell you right now you're buying at a discount. Think of you as buying stocks when they're down, or buying mutual funds when they're down, as buying them on a discount. They are going to come back up. Barrett, if you could tell me, has the stock market over the past 60 years, which way does it go?
It goes both ways, but not for as long of terms as people imagine. So the question we'll get most often, especially from older clients, is what if the market tanks? And generally, people think that, given today's current circumstances, oh, what's Trump going to do with tariffs, or what's the next year going to be? I hear the AI bubble is going to burst. All these little things they hear on TV, and they think, what if the market just crashes? If we look at it in a 1 year context, it is scary, right? It's a down. It's going to drop. The problem is, if you look at historical data and the longer you stretch that out, there's charts that we'll show sometimes in a client appointment, and you'll show years where the stock market's positive or blue, and years where it's negative is red. 9 out of 10 years, 7 out of 8 years, depending, you've got mostly blues. It's a mostly blue chart with a few little red spikes on the bottom. And so it goes to that roller coaster analogy. Depending on your time horizon, which was that first buzzword I used, the longer your time horizon is, the smoother that ride is. So I always use the roller coaster analogy. You're going to experience some up and downs. That's why you got on the ride. Like when I go to Six Flags, I want the thrill of the up and down a little bit, but I want to know I'm safe, right? I wouldn't get on that roller coaster if I didn't feel like I was safe. I know it's going to come back to the station. And so the longer that horizon is, think about stretching that track out. The ups and downs may not be as high, but the ride is a lot smoother and safer. And so if I start investing 2021, 22, I've got a longer horizon that if I do take a one big up and one big down, I love that, right? That was really exciting, but I want most of the coaster to be smooth, safe, and I want to know that when it's time for me to get back to the station, I'm buckled in, I was safe, I made it through the ride.
And let's just continue with this analogy.
Okay.
In that situation, you would probably be the crossbar.
100%.
That is keeping them in their seat as negative G's try to pull them out.
Right.
Absolutely. Okay. So we talked a little bit about, why to invest, obviously retirement, focusing on that, but how much do I invest? So obviously I'm sure there's going to be a wide range on your opinion here, but how much do I need to invest?
Well, one of the things we've already said is that time is your most important resource. So starting with anything, the most important thing is setting the habit, right? we're going to look at the problem. And when I say problem, your goal, let's say goal, goal's a better word. When you come in, my goal is to retire. That's one of the first questions we ask is, where do you want to go? What is it? Why are you here? Right. And it may be, I want to save money for my grandkids, but most of the time it's, I need to be able to retire. I want to know what retirement's going to look like. And so we have to look at what can you stomach now to save? So we'll look at a budget, right? We'll kind of budget out their months. What's your monthly income? How much do you put back? Do you put back anything? And then if they say they don't put back anything or they don't feel like they put back enough, then we start really deep diving the rest of their budget and really see. And most of the time, people will realize they do have some wiggle room in there. They're just afraid to use it or they're not using it in the right way. And so that's the first thing we do is what can we stomach to save right now? And then we also have to do the backwards math. So if we start calculating and we look at the end of that time horizon, let's say we're planning for 90, which is pretty standard in our industry, how much are you going to need then to live comfortably to make sure that your lifestyle change? We always try to plan for what if your lifestyle, you don't want your lifestyle to drop off after 63. I
No.
retired. You know, I want you to be able to live comfortably,
Those are my
enjoy
golden
the same
years.
thing. Yeah, this is the best time of your life, right? And so we know that number. And if we can work backwards from there and say, what you need to save to make sure that number when you get there is what we want it to be, it needs to be X number of dollars. And then our job is to compare those two numbers and figure out how we can get closer to the one we need from the one that they're currently saying that they're saving. Does that make sense?
Bridge that gap.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Barrett, what if I'm not a high income earner? What if I only have $100, $200 of disposable, $50 a month? Can I do that?
You can absolutely do that. And again, we talked about that snowball. Is that a tiny snowball? Absolutely. The hardest thing to get a young investor to do is to invest the first time. Once they invest the first time and see that it was feasible, and now in our generation, the way it comes out so naturally, you're not writing a check and taking it to the bank. It's coming out of your paycheck. You never see it. After a couple of paychecks, you don't even realize it's there because you've modeled the rest of your budget around what's coming out. So getting them to jump off that diving board is the hardest part. The second investment is not nearly as hard as the first because once they see a couple of months of that starting to trickle up and them not feel it, maybe I should double that. Maybe I should triple that. I actually do have more room. And as they start increasing their income on this end, then they start putting a little bit more back. And people love to see that compound interest. And I know we've kind of talked about that before. The start of the roller coaster, the start of the race isn't nearly as fun as the end because it does roll slower. That snowball is going a little bit slower than what you thought it might be. It's not chasing the excitement, but once you see it really start to pick up some steam and all of a sudden we have a 10% year and my account's rolling over, then I naturally want to put more into it because I'm seeing the dividends, if that makes sense.
Sure does. And, one of the things that I find sometimes too, not just the second investment is hard, but the increase is hard. Getting a participant or an investor to say, hey, you were giving $50. We've been doing that for a year and a half now. I noticed that you got a promotion or you got a raise at your job this year. What do you think about 75? I find a lot of times it's hard once they make that first, second, third, and it comes out of their check and they know it becomes comfortable. But then when you're like, hey, it's time, let's up this a little bit more, I feel some resistance to that too. And I think that with myself, it may be less that I'm not a financial advisor than you, because you probably can give a little bit better and more pointed advice, and you can probably look at their finances with them and say, hey, look, I see that you got an increase. This is what you need to do. This is how we bridge that gap. And your coaching is kind of what bridges that gap or brings those two together, right?
Absolutely.
So I like I told you before, I'm an old millennial. Full disclosure, I'm 43. If I were to not have anything in my 401k account or any retirement savings right now, is it too late for me?
It's never too late.
What should I expect?
You should expect that you're going to have to put in a little bit more to close the gap of what you're missing. And you should expect a little bit slower of a return than what you would have got had you started at 20. You have to change your strategy based on age. And so if you were to walk in with a blank slate and say, I have saved nothing, I feel like it's too late. The number one thing we say is it's never too late. You've got to get off the diving board. You have to get in the pool. Once you're in the pool, we'll figure out the strategies to make it grow, right? And so the strategies are going to change because your time horizon has shortened. And so maybe we need to be a little bit more aggressive on the investment front if that's the case. Maybe we need to chase a little higher return because your time horizon is a little shorter and we want to try to catch up some steam. Maybe you are going to have to put in a little bit more and cut your budget in other places if you're really concerned about the end goal, which is retirement. And so that's why a big misconception of our business is that everything's numbers, 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 when in reality, when you're coming to a financial advisor, the first thing we want to know is goals and stories. Tell us about you. Why are you here? Like, are you wanting to make sure that you can hang out with your grandkids when you're retired and you don't have to work till you die? Are you wanting to take trips? Are you wanting to buy a car? What is it that brought you into the office? And then we can work backwards from there. And so it's a goal-based question, not a how much money can you give us question. And so, no, it's never too late, short answer, and that it just changes the guardrails and the strategies we have to use to get you to those goals.
Perfect. All right, so let's just switch a little bit over and talk about how do I invest.
Okay.
So, I've made the decision. I think, you're right. I think it's time.
Mm-hmm.
What do I do? How do I start investing? What options do I have in the retirement space?
Okay. So the first thing we're going to ask when you come in, after we talk about goals based is what's your income? Where are you working? What money are you bringing in? The reason we need to know that is, do you have a 401k option? If your job offers a 401k option, we want to be investing in that 401k. Why? Well, because most companies will offer you a match, and we want to make sure that we can maximize what you're getting from that match money.
Well, Barrett, what is a match?
Okay, so when you are putting into a retirement account at your employer, they will match up to a certain percentage based on the company, what they decide, let's say 5%. If I put in 5% as an individual employee, the company matches that 5%. And so now you've doubled your investment.
Okay.
Correct? And so one of the first things we'll do from a strategy standpoint is if a person's not meeting their match or if there's money left on the table, we want to maximize if you don't do it, you're leaving money on the table. And we always say it kind of feels slimy because we're kind of saying make sure you get all the money you can out of your boss. But you really do want to do that. They're offering that. It's similar to health insurance. Like, you don't want to leave health insurance on the table and just wing it. Same thing here. If they're offering something that you can benefit from, which is a 5%, 6%, 7% match, whatever it may be, you want to take full advantage of that. And then once we hit that match, we'll determine if it makes more sense for them to put even more into the 401k, or does it make more sense for them to start an individual retirement account, which is a separate vehicle that is outside of their employer that usually, and I'm going to say usually because sometimes not, but most of the time opens their investment options.
Okay. So would you suggest just using employer, or do you think that diversification or opening two different type of accounts, like, can I have a 401k and an IRA?
You can absolutely have a 401k and IRA. And I would say that the majority of people out there, as they start to get older and they have more income to put into their retirement investments, tend to have a mix of those two. The best strategy plays that we normally have are get your match, make sure that you're maxing out whatever you can get from your employer, and then open up the reins a little bit and be a little bit more aggressive, or, have another retirement account where we can have the flexibility to move things in and out and really tailor that one to a specific retirement goal. So we would use a combination of the two. The other buzzy one that I think that young people are going to hear a lot, because this generation is using it more than ever, are Roth IRAs. So a high majority of our clients now have their 401k at work, their IRA, and their Roth IRA, because there's some tax implications and advantages through using the Roth IRA, especially the younger you are.
I see. Okay. And so, I like the strategy of having both, and to bring it back, that employer match to kind of our analogy, the employer is allowing you or helping you make your snowball bigger,
100%,
right?
100%, yep.
And you would be definitely remiss if you did not take full advantage of your employer's match. How do I know, I'm investing, but how do I benchmark myself? How do I know if I'm even giving enough? Is there a way for me to compare what others are doing? I'm a big competitive type of person, and I want to be better than others. And so, is there a way for me to see kind of how I am set against my age bracket?
From an age bracket standpoint, you can. I mean, you can get into the averages. You can really start doing your own research for that. I will say that we don't do a ton of comparative, only because everyone's story is different, and so it's hard to compare two people who may be similar in age, but that other aspects of their life are different. What I find interesting and what I think is going to really be a thorn for Gen Z and the next generation is that they tend to compare them. They have everyone's highlight reels, right? So they're tending to compare themselves to the best of what they're seeing on social media, on Facebook or whatever, when everyone's journey is different and they're not thinking about the goal-based approach. They may not need as much as their friend. They may have a different job that's going to accelerate at a slower rate than their friend who walked into. So what we would say is, I kind of caution against comparing yourself to everyone else's highlight reels and instead get onto the steady, slow, pound the rock investment and let that snowball roll over hill. And eventually your portfolios will look similar. I mean, you're going to catch up at some point given strategies, but don't compare yourself to we have to win right now. I have to compete right now, if that makes sense.
Sure, sure. The competition is, I guess, in retirement when I've got my sailboat and you don't.
Right.
So, that also reminds me when I think about, IRAs and then, 401ks offered by companies. 401ks have a limited investment selection in them. Companies, they do a really good job of having fiduciary teams and people who look at the wider market and choose a very slim set of investments that hopefully work and work for the entire company. But, that is only a scratch or a drop in the bucket of the different investments. And coming to someone like yourself, a financial advisor, using a non-employer-based retirement vehicle, it allows, I guess, the participant a larger world or a larger bucket that you have exposure and experience with.
Yeah. And so that is the benefit of the individual retirement account or the individual investment account. Is that we have the flexibility to kind of open up the guardrails to pull the gutters back in a bowling alley, if you will. And really, another buzzword we'll use that I think is important for this next generation to hear is risk tolerance. So that's one of the things we have to find out first. What is your tolerance for risk? Like, how much do you like the roller coaster ride? If you love the up and down and you're okay, you can stomach the up and down, there is higher risk, but there's also higher reward. Reward does come with some risk. And so if you want to chase a 10, 11, 12% return and you have the stomach for that, there's going to be years where you get a bigger return than a counterpart who may have left the gutters down, who wanted more protection on the roller coaster, et cetera. And that's why those 401ks have to kind of be a little bit more moderate-minded. We always tell people that. And we actually run some 401k plans or simple plans for employers. That's one of the things we do. We have a few. And when I give that presentation, I always remind them that your employer is looking out for your best interest, but also their best interest, right? And so those 401k plans can't just put you in 100% equity. Hey, we're going to buy all Google stock, because if something was to happen, the company's liable. Their money's tied into it as well. Whereas if you come and open an individual retirement account, the decision-making is really up to you / your financial advisor if you trust as a fiduciary. But I tell people all the time, if you walked in tomorrow and said, I would like to buy 500 shares of Google, if that's really what you want, I have to do that because you're asking me. I'm working for you. You're the client. I'll give them my advice whether or not I think to do that. Right. But what I'm saying is they have the flexibility, whereas they don't have as many options in the 401k because it's tied to the business. And so that's the reason the mix becomes so important, is because given your risk, if you are a little younger and you want to kind of drive the boat a little faster, we can do some things in your individual retirement account that you just cannot do inside that employer plan.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some things, maybe a little bit more touchy, but millennials, we were introduced to technology kind of a little early on in our life, but ever since then, Gen X or Gen Z, the Zoomers, even Gen Alpha, all they know is technology, immediate information right here in the palm of their hands. There's misconceptions, I think, and I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about those.
100%.
So I want to talk about the misconception that sometimes we have that, we're smart folks. We have access to information. I can do it myself. I think of things like, heck, GameStop, AMC for the win. Why is that dangerous? Why is that a dangerous thought to have?
This generation is so swarmed with information overload. They're getting the TikTok videos, they're seeing the YouTube reels, they're catching an article online through Twitter that says this is we can get rich if we do this right now. You're throwing a dart at a dartboard and it's gonna hit sometimes. There are going to be times where you ride the wave. And it's just like gambling in any other market, right? Like I could put $10,000 on Georgia, and if they win that football game, yes, I'm going to hit. Or if I spin the roulette wheel, same thing. GameStop's going to happen every once in a while, and someone's going to profit off of it. But you don't see the losing stories as much as you see the winning stories. So all of those, Instagram influencers and TikTok influencers who are giving you these highlight reel stories are not also telling you on the other side of the video that there is a higher risk involved in some of these types of investments. And so coming to a financial advisor, we hear all the time. I mean, in multi-generation, we'll have an older gentleman come in and say, well, I was watching Fox News today and they said do this. But you also will have the younger generation say, well, I saw X Instagram influencers say that we should be doing this. The beauty of our job is that we can give them both sides of the coin. He's absolutely correct. You could do this, and this is what your result would be. You could also do this, which comes with way less risk, and your end goal is still going to be met, and then we took on way less risk, or we didn't do a strategy that was half and half. And so that's one of the beauties of our jobs, is we get to hear those things, and we regurgitate all that information as well. I see those videos. I follow those people for the same reason. I want to hear what's trendy out there so that I also can play defense for my clients.
Well, what about things like, I have access to Robinhood.
Mm-hmm.
I have access to crypto.com,
Right.
Cash App. All these little applications allow me to invest. I think Acorns is another one that allows me to invest. I can round my money to the nearest dollar, and the little cents are a vehicle for investment. Is that a good way for me to focus on my retirement?
Those things are good, given that it can't be your only retirement vehicle, that it cannot be your saving grace. I like to say sometimes crypto, let's use crypto for example.
Sure.
Crypto's your dessert, not your dinner. Like it'd be great to put, there's a portion of that for your portfolio. You want some crypto? We'll throw some crypto in there. Older generation, you want some gold? We can put gold in your portfolio. Would I put your whole portfolio in? No, that's your dessert. That's not your dinner. If your dinner's prepared well and everything went well with dinner and everything looks good, we can have more dessert if you're eating healthy on this side. And I love that analogy because we have to make sure the dinner's sustaining you and it's good. And then we can play with dessert. And so that's kind of the analogy we've been using lately with some of those outside investments. My best friend has a Robinhood account. He's one of my clients. I've built his portfolio perfect for his retirement, but he likes to play. He likes to buy a stock, sell a stock. He likes to watch it during the day. What I found interesting is he very rarely looks at his portfolio at our company now because he knows it's steady. It's not going to change much. We look at it at the annual review. He turns on Robinhood or whatever app he's using every day, and he likes to watch it go up and down. But I won't let that be his entire portfolio, or else he'd always be watching that and all the anxiety and stress that comes with the up and downs that he doesn't have to get or stomach with his overall portfolio.
So use it if you want to,
Right.
but don't make it the focus of retirement. If you want to play, go for it.
Same thing I tell my son. You can have dessert, but after dinner, right? I'm not going to sit there and let him have 5 bowls of ice cream, but 1 bowl of ice cream is okay as long as you ate your meat.
Yeah, but I saw this one person, they made this really great investment and now they are a crypto millionaire. Right. That's going to happen to me.
Oh, yeah.
I know it's going to happen to me. Just the next investment.
The next one.
I know it's going to happen.
The next one.
And it never will.
If it happened for everyone, I would be out of a job.
Me too. Me too. Because I won't lie. I have my own play investment account. Now, I'll be honest, it is nowhere near the success that either any of my other retirement accounts, my 401k or my IRAs. The success in those are night and day different than the absolute red that goes through my own account. And it's because I don't have the knowledge. I don't keep up every day. I wake up in the morning. I don't turn on Bloomberg.
Right.
I don't look up, I'm not looking at the NASDAQ every day. I'm not pulling charts. I'm not running graphs. I'm not looking at those trends, but you do.
100%.
And so I think it's a really great idea that we have folk like yourself available to help us, make our money work for us, basically. I'm gonna use a term. And my dad is one of these, and I know that half the people watching this are thinking the same thing too. Investments are for boomers.
Right.
I have influencers. I watch Graham. I watch Grant. Caleb, I'll watch Caleb's episodes every now and again. I think I can do this. Why should I use you?
Right.
I've got influencers.
I think a couple reasons. One reason that I really want to hit on that I think that sometimes we ignore is that retirement for this generation is not going to look like retirement for boomers. I think it's clear that the pattern that we're on and the way that these generations carry themselves, retirement just looks completely different. It's not going to be our parents' retirement where they work in a factory or work in one job their entire life. They've put into their retirement account. They have the house. They've got the asset. They retire at 65 and they live out their retirement. That's not the way we're wired. We're already working remotely, switching jobs more than any other generation, wanting to retire earlier or at least, work remote or be flexible. And so we have to keep in mind that retirement's not going to look the same for this generation. The second reason that I would say is this generation also doesn't want the suited up, buttoned up, financial suit walking in, trying to tell them that they know exactly how to make them rich. What this generation wants, and I know because I think millennials are kind of at the tail end of it, they want a coach. They want somebody to show them the ropes, to almost teach them to do it themselves. And it's not just in the financial world. We see this in every portion of life, right? Like I like to get on TikTok and watch people cook because then it makes me feel like I can go cook and I can kind of see the rails and I can go back to the videos or whatever. I like someone to explain it to me. ChatGPT, it's just the way our generation's headed. So I would be remiss to think when I bring in a 25-year-old or, a young 30-year-old couple that I could treat them the same as I treat my 60, 65 retired clients because it's not the same conversation. What they're looking for is someone to guide them, to coach them, to tell them they're on the right path, to give them the tools where they feel like they're the pilot and I'm the co-pilot. Whereas a lot of our older clients want you to fly the plane and land it now that they're done. That generation wants you to be their co-pilot. Show me how to do it. We'll let you do the investment part of it, but can you tell us how to budget? Can you show us what we should be doing? Can you tell us what of all this information we're regurgitating? Can you be our filter? Can you catch it? Can you show us? And so I find myself in those client relationships being more of a client and an actual advisor in one sense of the word, more so than the boomer generation.
Awesome. I think we're about coming to kind of end of our time, but before we go, if you could sum up what we said today in your 1 to 2 sentence advice for folks, what would it be?
I would say for the younger generation, don't be afraid of starting and feeling like you're behind. I think this generation's naturally, and even later millennials are naturally more anxious, more stressed about money. There's so much noise going on that when you go seek out financial advice, whether it be from me or any other financial advisor, what we're there for is to quiet the noise. My goal is not to make you an investor. It's to make you confident, to make you feel good about your money plan. And so we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're trying to get you started. We're trying to start the wheel, start the motion. So I would say that's the number one thing is start today. Like, don't wait. Time is your most important resource, your most important asset. Let's get off the diving board and get in the pool. And the other thing, if you're really on the fence about seeking financial advice, just remember that you're going to hear a lot of complexities. You're going to see numbers. You're going to hear all these huge, big words. But at the end of the day, what we do and what the questions we ask are, what do they want? What do they have? And then how can we get them to close the gap in between? That's really all financial advice is.
Awesome. Hey, I really appreciate you coming in today. I really enjoyed this.
It was awesome. Great conversation.
Absolutely. Well, there you have it, folks. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Worth a Listen, and I hope it was worth your time.